There is a lie that has been whispered into your ear since the day you were born. It is peddled by Hollywood movies, reinforced by billion-dollar advertising campaigns, and silently accepted by almost everyone you know. The lie is simple. Passion has an expiration date. We are told that intimacy belongs exclusively to the young. We are conditioned to believe that the fire of desire is fueled only by smooth skin, high testosterone, and physical perfection. And when those things fade, as they inevitably will, we are told that the bedroom door should be quietly closed, locked, and forgotten. Society looks at the aging body and sees a tragedy. It sees a has-been. It labels the older years as asexual, or worse. It views intimacy among the elderly as something shameful, something indecent that should be hidden away. But the Stoics saw it differently. What if I told you that everything you fear about aging and intimacy is wrong? What if the fading of youthful lust isn't a loss, but a liberation? The Roman philosopher Cicero, deeply influenced by Stoic thought, once quoted the poet Sophocles. When Sophocles was a very old man, someone asked him, "Do you still engage in lovemaking? Can you still perform?" Most people would expect him to be sad, to be nostalgic for his lost youth. Instead, Sophocles smiled and said, "Peace. Be still, I have escaped from it. I feel as if I have escaped from a mad and furious master." Think about that. A mad and furious master. He wasn't mourning the loss of the physical impulse. He was celebrating the arrival of freedom. This is the core of what we are exploring today. We are going to challenge the modern definition of sex, which is obsessed with performance and friction, and we are going to replace it with the Stoic definition of intimacy, which is obsessed with connection and presence. We are going to dive deep into a subject that few dare to talk about. We will combine the ancient wisdom of Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius with modern psychological science to prove that the golden years can indeed be the most intimate years of your life. This is not a video about how to act young. This is a manifesto on how to age with power. If you are ready to reject the cultural narrative and reclaim the dignity of your later years, do me a favor, tap the like button right now. It tells the algorithm that we want substance, not just noise. And if you are new here, subscribe to Stoic Focus. Are you ready to redefine what it means to be lovers in the winter of life? Let's open the gates. We must begin by dismantling the stage on which modern life plays out. Look around you. Turn on the television. Scroll through your feed. What do you see? You see a culture that is pathologically obsessed with the beginning. We worship the start of things. We worship the sunrise, but we fear the sunset. We worship the bloom, but we discard the fruit. In the realm of intimacy, this cultural obsession creates a toxic narrative. It tells us that sexuality is the exclusive domain of the firm, the unlined, and the energetic. It suggests that once the body begins to soften, once the hair turns gray, the capacity for passion evaporates. This is what sociologists call the deficit model of aging. It views getting older solely as a process of losing things, losing strength, losing looks, losing relevance. But the Stoic view is radically different. To the Stoic, nature does not make mistakes. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who wrote his meditations in the winter of his own life, reminded us constantly to look at nature with clear eyes. He wrote, "Nature wills the end of a thing just as much as its beginning." He observed that the cracks in a loaf of bread, or the ripeness of a fig just before it bursts, possess a unique beauty that is distinct from their earlier forms. Apply this to intimacy. The lovemaking of youth is often like a summer storm, violent, intense, and driven by forces largely outside of our control. It is biological urgency. It is hormonal compulsion. But the intimacy of the older years, it is the harvest. It is deliberate. It is chosen. Seneca, perhaps the most eloquent of the Roman Stoics on the subject of aging, wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that completely flips the modern narrative. He said, "Let us cherish and love old age, for it is full of pleasure if one knows how to use it. Fruits are most welcome when they are over. Youth is most charming at its close. The last drink is the one that delights the toper, the one that puts the finishing touch to his drunkenness." Seneca is telling us something profound here. He is saying that the pleasure of the end is not a diluted version of the beginning. It is its own distinct vintage. It is richer because it is finite. So, why do we struggle with this? Why do so many men feel emasculated when their testosterone drops? Why do so many women feel invisible when they enter menopause? It is because we have confused capacity with value. In American culture, we are often judged by what we can do, not who we are. We treat the body like a machine. If the machine isn't running at 100% efficiency, if the gears grind a little, if the startup time is slower, we think the machine is broken. We think it belongs in the scrapyard. Science, interestingly enough, backs up the Stoic wisdom here, contradicting our cultural fears. You may have heard of the U-curve of happiness. Economists and psychologists have found that human happiness tends to bottom out in our 40s, the era of the midlife crisis, but then something amazing happens. It starts to climb. By the time people reach their 60s and 70s, they often report higher levels of satisfaction and well-being than they did in their 20s. Why? Because the pressure is off. The biological mandate to reproduce, to compete, to win at the genetic lottery, it fades. When that pressure fades, you are left with the raw truth of connection. This is the transition from Eros, the frantic, possessive love, to something deeper. Let's look at a practical example. Consider a couple in their 70s. Let's call them Robert and Sarah. In their 30s, their intimacy was often quick, a relief from the stress of careers and child-rearing. It was transactional in a biological sense. Now, in their 70s, the speed is gone. The biological urgency is gone. If they view this through the lens of modern society, they might feel like failures. They might buy pills and creams to try to force their bodies back into a time machine. They might try to mimic the sexuality of their 20s, which is destined to fail and lead to shame. But if they view this through a Stoic lens, they see an opportunity. They realize that for the first time in their lives, they are meeting each other nakedly, not just in body, but in soul. They are no longer distracted by the mad master of lust. They are choosing to touch, to hold, and to be with one another, not because their hormones are screaming at them, but because their spirits are aligned. This is what Epictetus meant when he taught us to distinguish between what is up to us and what is not. The firmness of your skin, not up to you. The speed of your arousal, largely not up to you. These are indifference. But your ability to love, your ability to be present, your ability to offer kindness and affection, that is fully up to you. The myth of the asexual elder is a lie designed to sell you anti-aging products. The reality is that the older you get, the more qualified you become to understand what true intimacy actually is. You stop performing for an audience that isn't there, and you start connecting with the person who is. You are not a faded version of your former self. You are a distilled version. You are the brandy, not the wine. And the brandy burns slower, but it warms you deeper. In the next section, we are going to talk about the physical vessel itself. How do we apply Stoic indifference to the inevitable decline of our bodies without giving up on them? How do we find Amor Fati, the love of fate, when looking in the mirror? Stay focused. We are just getting started. Let us move from the abstract to the concrete. Let us walk into the bathroom, turn on the harsh fluorescent lights, and look in the mirror. For many people, this moment is a daily act of violence. They look at the reflection and they do not see a survivor. They see a failure. They see the roadmap of time etched across their skin, the deepening lines, the graying hair, the softening of muscles that were once taut. In the West, we are taught to fight a war on aging. We battle wrinkles with creams. We battle gravity with surgery, and we battle biology with pharmaceuticals. We treat our own bodies like enemy territory that must be reconquered. But the Stoic asks a dangerous question. Why are you fighting a war you are guaranteed to lose? Epictetus, the lame slave who became a master philosopher, had a view of the body that was shockingly unsentimental. He famously said, "You are a little soul carrying around a corpse." Now, to modern ears, that sounds morbid. But pause for a second. Let it sink in. Epictetus was not telling us to hate our bodies. He was telling us to detach our identity from them. He was teaching us that the body is merely the vessel, not the captain. It is made of clay. It is fragile. It is subject to the laws of physics and time. To pin your happiness on the condition of your clay vessel is the definition of insanity. In the realm of sexuality, this attachment to the physical form is the root of all suffering. Let's speak directly to the men for a moment. The modern man is haunted by the ghost of his teenage self. He remembers a time when arousal was automatic, immediate, and relentless. When he reaches his 50s, 60s, or 70s, and the machinery begins to slow down, when he encounters erectile dysfunction or a longer refractory period, he doesn't just see a physiological change, he sees a moral failing. He feels less than. He feels his manhood is evaporating. This is where the Stoic discipline of judgment comes in. Marcus Aurelius would tell you, it is not the event that disturbs you, but your judgment of the event. The event is the body is responding slower. That is a neutral fact of biology. Just like the sun setting or autumn leaves falling, the judgment is, I am broken. I am weak. I am no longer a man. Stoicism commands you to delete that judgment. You must view your changing physiology not as a malfunction, but as a calibration. Nature is telling you to slow down. Nature is telling you that the time for performance, for hammering away like a machine is over. It is time for a sexuality that is less about hydraulics and more about sensation. And to the women, you live in a society that places your sexual value almost entirely on your visual appeal. You are bombarded with images of airbrushed perfection. When menopause arrives, when the body changes shape, the instinct is to hide, to turn off the lights, to withdraw from intimacy because you feel you no longer deserve to be looked at. The Stoic response to this is Amor Fati, love your fate. Friedrich Nietzsche coined the term, but the DNA of the idea is pure Stoicism. Amor Fati is not just tolerating what happens to you, it is loving it. It is looking at the aging body, the scars from surgeries, the stretch marks from childbirth, the spots from the sun, and saying, "This is my history. This is the evidence that I have lived." Why would you want to erase the evidence of your life? When you bring this mindset into the bedroom, something magical happens. The indifference to the aesthetic perfection allows for a profound freedom. You stop auditing yourself. You stop sucking in your stomach. You stop worrying about the angle of the light. When you stop auditing, you can finally start feeling. Think of the distinction between a preferred indifferent and a dispreferred indifferent. In Stoicism, health and beauty are preferred indifferents. It is nice to have them. Yes, we prefer them. But they are indifferent because they do not define our moral worth or our capacity for virtue. If your legs are strong, good. If your legs are weak, you can still be a virtuous person. If you can perform sexually like an athlete, good. If you cannot, you can still be a loving, intimate partner. The capacity for connection is not housed in the genitals. It is housed in the mind and the heart. Psychologically, this is what we call cognitive reframing. If you try to force a 70-year-old body to act like a 20-year-old body, you create cognitive dissonance, a painful gap between reality and desire. This leads to anxiety, and ironically, anxiety is the greatest killer of libido. By accepting the reality of the body, you remove the anxiety. And when the anxiety vanishes, you might be surprised to find that the desire, the true unforced desire, comes rushing back. So, the next time you stand before that mirror, do not look for the flaws. Look for the vessel that has carried you through decades of storms. Respect it, care for it, but do not worship it. You are the pilot, not the plane, and the pilot can still fly. Even if the paint is chipping, now that we have made peace with the vessel, we must look at the journey itself. How does the act of love change when we stop being driven by the mad master of hormones? How do we move from Eros to Philia? Now we arrive at the heart of the matter. We have dealt with the mind, and we have dealt with the body. Now we must deal with the fire itself. We need to talk about the quality of the heat. In the ancient Greek world, there were many words for love, but two of them stand in stark contrast to one another, Eros and Philia. Eros is the love of passion. It is the love of the loins. It is the fiery, chaotic, possessive desire that drives young lovers to madness. It is the biological imperative screaming, "I must have this, and I must have it now." Philia, on the other hand, is the love of deep friendship. It is the love of shared values, of mutual respect, and of profound understanding. It is a love that does not scream. It breathes, The tragedy of modern culture is that we try to force Eros to last forever. We judge the success of a 40-year marriage by whether it still has the manic energy of the first 6 months. And when that energy inevitably burns out, because no fire can rage at maximum intensity forever without consuming the house, we think the love is dead. But the Stoic knows better. The Stoic understands that the fire is not dying, it is transforming. It is undergoing an alchemical shift from the flash of the match to the steady, radiating heat of the coals. Remember what Sophocles said about escaping the mad and furious master. When you are young, you are a slave to your hormones. You are dragged around by your impulses. You have sex often not because you choose to, but because you have to. It is a hunger that must be fed. But in the golden twilight of life, the chains are broken. The mad master has left the building. This means that for the first time in your life, intimacy becomes a pure act of volition. When an older couple comes together, they are not scratching an itch. They are making a statement. They are saying, I see you, I value you, and I choose to be close to you. There is a dignity in chosen intimacy that accidental lust can never match. So, how do we practice this? How do we embrace this shift? First, we must redefine the act. We have to stop defining sex solely as friction and orgasm. That is a juvenile definition. It is a definition written by pornography and biology. To the Stoic elder, intimacy expands. It becomes what I call the architecture of touch. It is the way you hold hands while walking. It is the way you sit together in silence. It is the massage that eases the aches of the day. It is the long, wandering conversation in the dark before sleep takes you. Musonius Rufus, the great Stoic teacher on marriage, taught that the union of husband and wife was the fundamental building block of the universe. He didn't emphasize the gymnastics of the bedroom, he emphasized the union of souls. When the physical distractions fade, when you aren't worried about performance or pregnancy or impressing the other person, you are left with the nakedness of the soul. This brings us to the Stoic virtue of temperance. Now, be careful here. In the modern world, we hear temperance and we think abstinence. We think of a monk eating dry bread, but that is not the Stoic meaning. Temperance is not the absence of pleasure. It is the mastery of pleasure. It means savoring. Think of the difference between a teenager eating a fast food burger and a connoisseur drinking a vintage wine. The teenager eats fast, barely tasting it, driven by hunger. That is youth. The connoisseur drinks slowly, noticing every note, every nuance, every texture. That is age. In your later years, you may have less sex in terms of frequency, but the quality of that connection can be infinitely higher. You have the patience now to explore. You have the time to be gentle. You have the wisdom to know that the goal isn't the finish line. The goal is the dance itself. This shift allows for a vulnerability that is terrifying to the young. When you are young and your body is firm, you use your body as armor. You hide behind your beauty. You hide behind your strength. But when you are old, the armor is gone. You are exposed, and it is in that exposure that true love is found. To let someone see your aging body, really see it, and to feel them accept it and desire it, that is a validation that touches the core of your humanity. It says, I am loved for who I am, not for what I look like. This is the transition from Eros, I want you because you make me feel good, to Philia, I love you because you are you. So, do not mourn the loss of the frantic sparks of youth. They were beautiful, yes, but they were exhausting. Welcome the coals. The coals stay hot all night long. The coals cook the meal. The coals keep you warm when the winter comes. In the next section, we will discuss the practical application of the Stoic mindset in the bedroom. How do we handle the specific anxieties of the moment? How do we use the discipline of assent when things don't go according to plan? How do we laugh when we used to cry? The philosophy must become practice. Let's keep moving. Philosophy is worthless if it stays in the library. It is just ink on paper. It is just hot air. For Stoicism to matter, it must be taken out of the books and brought into the battlefield. And for the aging lover, the battlefield is often the bedroom. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the ego is most vulnerable. When you are naked, vulnerable, and facing the realities of a body that no longer obeys your commands, you need more than just positive thinking. You need a tactical toolkit. We are going to apply 3 specific Stoic disciplines to the act of intimacy itself: the discipline of assent, the here and now, and the practice of loss. Let's start with the most difficult one, the discipline of assent. Imagine this scenario. You are in a moment of intimacy. The lights are low. The mood is right. And then the body fails to cooperate. Maybe it is erectile dysfunction. Maybe it is a lack of lubrication. Maybe it is a sudden spasm of back pain. In that split second, the untrained mind, the mind of the non-Stoic, panics. It launches a catastrophe narrative. It says, "This is a disaster. I am humiliated. My partner is disappointed. This is the end." This narrative creates shame. And shame is the ultimate mood killer. Shame shuts down connection. It makes you want to pull up the covers and hide. But the Stoic warrior catches that thought. He uses the discipline of assent. He stops the narrative at the gate. He looks at the situation and says, "My body is experiencing a mechanical pause. That is the event. Everything else is a story I am inventing." Instead of shame, the Stoic chooses adaptability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." If the traditional path to pleasure is blocked by biology, you do not quit. You find a new way. You pivot. You use your hands. You use your words. You use your humor. There is a profound intimacy in being able to laugh with your partner in bed when things don't go according to plan. That laughter is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of confidence. It says, "We are bigger than our anatomy." Next, we move to hic et nunc, the here and now. The greatest thief of pleasure in old age is comparison. When you touch your partner, if your mind drifts back to 1985, if you are comparing this moment to the honeymoon, to the time when you could go all night, to the time when gravity had not yet done its work, you are robbing yourself of the present. You are in bed with a ghost. Seneca warned us, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." He also warned us not to live in the past. When you are intimate, you must practice radical presence. You must focus entirely on the sensation of this moment, the texture of the skin now, the rhythm of the breath now, the warmth of the body now. This vintage of love is different, yes, but if you stop comparing it to the vintage of your youth, you will find it has a complexity and a sweetness that you missed back then. Do not let the ghost of who you were destroy the joy of who you are. Finally, we come to the most powerful tool in the Stoic arsenal, negative visualization, in the bedroom. Yes, especially in the bedroom. The Stoics practice premeditatio malorum, imagining the worst to appreciate the present. It is a dark truth, but a necessary one. One of you will leave this room first. Statistically, inevitably, one partner will die before the other. One side of the bed will be empty. Most people run from this thought. They bury it. But I want you to bring it into your awareness, not to make you sad, but to make you desperate. Desperate to love, desperate to connect. Tonight, when you lie next to your partner, look at them. Look at the lines on their face. Listen to them sleeping. And for just 5 seconds, imagine that they are gone. Imagine the silence of the house without them. Imagine the coldness of the sheets on their side. Feel the crushing weight of that loss. And then, come back. Realize that they are still here. They are warm. They are breathing. You have been given one more day, one more night. Suddenly, their snoring isn't annoying. It is a symphony of life. Suddenly, their cold feet aren't a nuisance. They are a reminder that there is a body to hold. This is what turns a routine, boring Tuesday night, into a sacred event. When you realize that your time together is a finite resource, you stop wasting it on petty arguments. You stop wasting it on insecurity. You stop wasting it on being too tired. You touch them like it is the last time, because, as the Stoics remind us, one day it will be. This intensity, this urgent, grateful, present love is something that youth cannot understand. Youth thinks it has forever. Age knows it does not. And that knowledge is the secret ingredient that makes the intimacy of the elder years so incredibly powerful. We have one final step to take. We must look at the legacy of this love. We must conclude our journey by understanding how this private act of connection stands as a final victory against the darkness. We have reached the end of our journey. We have traveled from the myths of society, through the acceptance of the aging body, and into the deep, quiet waters of chosen love. And now, we are left with one final truth, a truth that transforms intimacy in the golden twilight from a biological function into a spiritual victory. That truth is this: intimacy in the face of death is the ultimate act of rebellion. When you are young, sex is often a distraction from life. It is entertainment. It is release. But when you're old, intimacy is an affirmation of life. Every time you choose to hold your partner, every time you choose to bridge the gap between two aging bodies, you are shouting into the void. You are telling the darkness, we are still here. We are still warm. We are still capable of joy. This is not sad. This is not gross. As the ignorant world might whisper, this is heroic. It is easy to love when the skin is smooth and the future is endless. That requires no courage. That is just biology doing its job. But to love when the skin is weathered, to love when the joints ache, to love when you know, with absolute certainty, that the clock is ticking down to zero. That is a moral achievement. That is a virtue that the young have not yet earned. So, do not let the world strip you of this dignity. Do not let the mad master of youth tell you that you are finished. You are not finished. You are just now getting to the good part. You are getting to the part where the love is distilled, purified, and unbreakable. The Stoics taught us that we cannot control the length of our lives, but we can control the width and the depth of them. By embracing intimacy in your later years, you are adding depth. You are proving that the human spirit is stronger than the decaying body. You have moved from the wild forest fire of youth, which burns everything in its path, to the hearth fire of the elder years. The forest fire is dangerous. It is chaotic. But the hearth fire is where we cook our food. It is where we tell our stories. It is where we find safety from the cold. Keep the hearth burning. If this message resonated with you, if it gave you a new perspective on the years ahead, please like this video. It helps us spread this philosophy to others who are struggling in silence. And if you want to continue building a mind that is fortress strong, subscribe to Stoic Focus. We are here to remind you that philosophy is not just for the classroom. It is for the bedroom, the boardroom, and the hospital room. It is for life. Tonight, do not go to sleep as strangers. Reach out across the sheets. Find the hand of the person who has walked this long road with you. Squeeze it. And remember, you have escaped the mad master. You are free. Focus, love, live. I'll see you in the next video.